Well, greetings to everyone again, and it's lovely to see so many people here and to be part of this wonderful event, which I'm very proud of you all for keeping going this long. I hope it flourishes for as long as it takes for this planet to reach unity. So, we have to keep going. I'm going to refrain from my comments on the chairman's wonderful discourse. I've got many philosophical points I'd like to make in response, but I'm going to go straight into my talk. If there's a bit of time at the end, I'll come back to some points. So this is, I call this the call to world peace from the Universal Brotherhood, a contribution. This is my contribution. All cultures and all religions, and indeed all belief systems, apart from possibly a few extremist and pathological misunderstandings of the purpose of human existence, agree that peace on earth between human beings, cultures and civilizations is the best way that we can manifest our highest potential and bring out the seeds of the divine image, which according to all traditions is buried deep within us all. Now, it's a great honour to have been invited here to give this presentation, especially as it's taking place in Istanbul, an extraordinary city at the edge of Asia and Europe, which stands symbolically for the reconciliation of East and West, North and South, in the hearts of all mankind. Here, ancient Greek sages and mystics, Trojans, Lydians, Lycians, Hittites, Persians, Christians, Islamic scientists and Sufis, not to mention Jewish sages, Romans and Turks, Arabs, Armenians, Macedonians, Georgians, Slavs, and so on, and all the whole extraordinary coming to and fro of all the past empires. All have left their traces here, as I discovered when visiting the Istanbul Museum of Archaeology recently, back in August. So let me first thank them all for creating the energy field in which I can address these remarks. As coordinator of Philosophers for Peace globally since 1990, and director of the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy since 1991, I've spent the last 30 years of intensive study into the ways and means that can be provided for the intellectual and spiritual reconciliation of humanity. And I would like to share here a few of my findings. Number one, underlying all the exoteric religions of mankind, there is a common core spirituality, which we as human beings have a duty to seek out. It has various names in different cultures and traditions. Is being called, for example, the ancient wisdom or primal spirituality, esoteric or Gnostic wisdom, philosophia, Kabbalah, Sufism, the religion of light, the perennial philosophy, and so on. Point two. Most of the religious wars that are underway on this planet, and have been for some time, are brought about when the exoteric followers of various religions fail to appreciate the esoteric harmony that exists at the place where dogma rises above itself into an appreciation of transcendental beauty. The fanatics of religious fundamentalism have got stuck somewhere in believing in an ungenerous deity. Their image of God is mean and parsimonious. It is premised on the idea that different revelatory streams are in deadly rivalry and competition, and must therefore fight each other to the death for hegemony. I would respectfully like to point out that this way of thinking is exactly the cause of so many of our conflicts and wars in recent history. Over recent decades, point three, a new social science has developed, concerned with conflict and peace research, which draws heavily from sociology, political science, anthropology, economics, and associated disciplines. In my own PhD research, I proposed that a new approach is needed to help heal the specifically religious conflicts in our era, and therefore suggested the notion of transpersonal theory and transpersonal psychology might best provide the underpinnings of such a new development for the social, political and historical sciences engaged with peace and conflict research. 4. One of the crucial differences of transpersonal theory as an approach to human experience is that it takes seriously the truth claims of people who have reported mystical or peak experiences taking place in their lives. Most people, in fact, have moments of extraordinary insight, bliss, joy, and enlightenment occasionally in their lives. Sometimes people experience what can only be called paranormal phenomena, such as telepathy, precognition, channeling, clairvoyance, clairaudience. Hitherto, most epistemological maps of reality have dismissed these kind of experiences as pathological or simply as the fruit of an overactive imagination. However, the evidence has now mounted up unassailably that far from being weird or unusual, in actual fact we human beings have a noetic side to our nature. It is this realm that gives us meaning and purpose in our lives, and which motivates and fuels all our deepest creative and cultural achievements. Viktor Frankl, the psychologist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, realized that those who did survive were those who could marshal an innocence of meaning and purpose which transcended their suffering. Those who lost their will to meaning simply gave up and died. This is the condition we're facing as a planet. What we have are rival competing meaning maps in violent competition. The challenge facing peace research is how to harmonize them and find an overall meaning matrix that can satisfy both the intellectual, emotional, physical and spiritual needs of all mankind. Now, point number 5. In order to expedite this work, one of my own contributions, and this has emerged out of 30 years of teaching, including in secondary schools at quite senior level in the UK, has been to create a periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions. Now, inspired by Mendeleev's periodic table of the chemical elements, this periodic table of religions and philosophies is a schematic diagram which is comprehensive in its approach. The table takes the form it does because, I admire Mendeleev's periodic table of the chemical elements as an intellectual exercise. It's a very neat division of material reality. I'm talking about intellectual reality here. It's interesting, Mendeleev was a friend of a Russian expert on Hindu philosophy called Bodling. And Bodling was an expert on Panini, who was a grammarian, who studied the formation of the sounds of Sanskrit. And he analysed sound and meaning down to its core essence. So what I'm trying to do here is to analyse ideas and philosophies and religious systems down to their essential nature. There's something fundamental in human nature which seeks order, harmony and patterning in reality. It occurs in every field of knowledge and every discipline. The actual act of knowing, the actual task of science, is surely bound up with this ordering function, this work towards systematization. Aristotle defined the uniqueness of what makes us human as precisely this fact that our noetic quality, our rational soul, seeks to find this order and patterns in existence in all that we touch and do. But why is it that in the field of religious and philosophical studies, the search for such ordering and patterning should be somehow eluding us? Now, just as in the periodic table of the physical elements, this noetic table breaks down into certain basic categories. They're colour-coded, so the green at the top represents primal religions from the most ancient times. if you think about the history of the Turkish people, it would be the shamanic times from when the Turks were in their original homeland. And it includes all the other pagan and primal religions of history. The red is the Buddhist religion and its different schools. Light blue are the different Christian denominations. This yellow, bright yellow, is the Hindu traditions. And the pink stands for Chinese faiths. Light yellow stands for the philosophical schools. This is things like Kantianism, Hegelianism, and so on. Esoteric traditions also have their place, things like Freemasonry, Anthroposophy, Theosophy, Rosicrucianism, and so on. Inside Islam, you have the different schools of Sufism and Gnostic forms of Islam. You also have things like the Yazidis and so on. And then in the light grey, you have the new religious movements, which have been going, since a couple of hundred years, some of them. Now, my idea is that if this table, which is available on the website as well, and it represents about 30 years of detailed research, on the website version or in the book version, you can click on each box and you get very detailed data about each faith tradition. So it tells you who founded it, when, how many believers and followers it has now, and a cumulative total, how many it's had in the whole of world history. These are guesstimates. We can't exactly know how many Zoroastrians there have been in the whole history of the Persian Empire, but we can make an educated guess. And we know roughly how many there are on the planet at the moment. So if this was available in every school, say in Turkey, as a big poster, and the website was accessed by teachers, let's say in Syria, Iraq, the vision is that as teachers of religious studies and philosophy in schools and universities make this available to children and to young minds, rather than being indoctrinated into narrow perspectives in which, my tradition that I was born into is the only or the best one, and all the others are in error, we can stand back and look at the incredible complexity and beauty of the noetic world that we humans have created. If the knowledge book is a kind of summary of maybe the future of knowledge, this is a survey in diagrammatic form of the sum total of knowledge that human beings have achieved in all their different cultural and linguistic and religious complexities. So it's intended also for use by UN agencies, humanitarian relief bodies. Because, the crisis we've been seeing in Syria and Iraq represents to me a failure on our political governance structures to grasp positively the potential that religion and spirituality can provide for healing. Most secular bodies like the UN, the European Union and so on, various governments, are terrified of religion, so they kind of block it out, they ignore it. This is a tool for them to understand it scientifically and no longer be afraid of it, but to work with the different religious communities, say in Iraq, which are incredibly interesting. The Kurds have access to ancient wisdom going right back to Zoroastrianism and so on, different Sufi groups. And the Yazidis, likewise, an extraordinarily rich intellectual spiritual heritage. So rather than being afraid of religion, I'm saying study it. Like a doctor of ideas, I'm saying let's look at it positively and examine it and not be afraid of knowledge. Okay, so that's that project. Number 6 I want to talk to now. If the Universal Brotherhood can be defined as those people, groups, orders and spiritual cells who over the centuries have upheld and maintained the universal wisdom tradition within all the various cultures and civilizations, tribes and peoples of mankind, then it follows that if the Universal Brotherhood is indeed to assume an effective call to world peace, then it will be able to make use of, for example, the periodic table as a cartographic element presentation of all the different warring belief systems who are fighting for hegemony on the planet at this time. It's time to put the cards on the table and give people complete knowledge of the systems that are in dispute. And true lovers of wisdom, I think, are found in all the traditions, and they will respond positively. This goes on to point number 7. It's my considered opinion that enlightenment is not a monopoly of any one spiritual or prophetic lineage. I believe the scientific evidence points to the fact that there have been realized souls and advanced sages living in all different religious and cultural contexts throughout the whole of human history. It is important, therefore, that we begin an intellectual discourse as philosophers of religion and history and scholars, in which we begin to talk about the comparative study of enlightenments. When a Buddhist talks, say, about nirvana, is it the same as a Hindu talking about moksha? Or a Jew who talks about the Sephirot of Keter, the crown? Or a Sufi who talks about Irfan? Is the human epistemological experience of realization and enlightenment exactly the same across all cultural boundaries? Well, surely it has to ultimately be, but we've packaged it with these different words, these different concepts. So one of the projects I've been working on with my institute as a philosopher of peace is a dictionary of philosophical terms, going into detail on the words for enlightenment, realization, in Sanskrit, Hebrew, Greek, Turkish, French, etc. And to go into the etymology of them, because then you really get to grips with the seed idea behind that. So number 8, what are the implications of this study of comparative enlightenment for the way that theology is traditionally taught in our seminaries and schools? At present, the different religious theological training schools sometimes emphasize their own evangelical priority and claim that, in order to elevate their own sense of self-importance, they have to denigrate and devalue rival schools of thought. But logically, this is flawed. Psychologically, it's disastrous. In order to boost my self-esteem, I don't really need to attack yours. So what if, instead, all the theological training colleges on the planet, for all the priests, imams, rabbis, etc., all taught an inclusive and universalist approach to the wisdom traditions of mankind as a whole? What if, instead of focusing fanatically and narrowly on their own particular lineage, they also taught the best elements of all the other spiritual traditions of mankind? So number 9. Following on from this line of thought, I've long held the view that the wars and battles between the rival factions within religions are also and can be avoided, and that scholars can make an important contribution to the healing of such religious bigotry and rivalry. For example, during the European Enlightenment of the early modern period, thinkers on both sides of the Catholic-Protestant split began to realise that there was a greater unity underlying both their positions, and that the true duty of a Christian philosopher was to be both Catholic in their range and universality of their thinking, and Protestant in their abhorrence of corruption and wickedness in high places. So figures such as Francis Bacon, the philosopher from Britain, Leibniz, Descartes, Lord Edward Herbert of Cherbury, Sir Isaac Newton, Hegel, later Karl Rahner, Thomas Merton, Hans Kung, and all these thinkers, they draw on the best aspects of Catholic and Protestant, and indeed Orthodox Christian thought as appropriate, and indeed universal thought. They transcend the label of mere Christianity and become universal thinkers. This gave birth to the Christian ecumenical movement, Vatican II of the World Council of Churches. Now, I believe that the time has come for a rapprochement and similar lasting peace treaty, an enlightenment if you want, between the rival Islamic factions, between the Shia and the Sunni, the Sufi, the Ismaili, the Wahhabi, the Druze, the Alawi, etc. We cannot afford to stand back with good conscience and watch all these rival groups slaughtering each other across Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Yemen, the wider Middle East any longer, Palestine, Israel, etc. The latest findings from peace and conflict research theory can, I believe, help bring about genuine peace and reconciliation between these different factions within Islam. Surely the whole point of Islam is to surrender to the source of love, life, wisdom. And surely that source would want us all to live in peace with one another. My institute is very willing to help to participate in organising a detailed series of theological investigations and existential encounters which would lead to a rapprochement and ultimately a diplomatic peace treaty in the real world between Shia and Sunni representatives, scholars and intellectuals in the first instance. I personally could explain in detail to those interested how this can be accomplished intellectually without sacrificing the integrity of the greatest of the thinkers active within each of these lineages. As an absolute first move, it requires the declaration of inter-Islamic non-violence, that one will not harm, attack, hurt, torture or kill followers of a different branch of Islam. Philosophically, it obliges thinkers to adopt a model of parallel truths, parallel realities, in which what is true relatively for each observer is not necessarily absolutely true from all perspectives. It requires Islamic philosophy to move forward into the 21st century of quantum theory and relativity theory, and to take transpersonal thinkers like Ken Wilber, Stan Grof, George Ferrer, Richard Tarnas, Michael Washburn, James Hillman, Carl Jung, Abraham Maslow, Fritjof Schuon, René Guénon, S.H. Nasser, etc. But actually there's nothing new here, because in fact it's exactly this position that was taken centuries ago by the greatest of Islamic sages, Ibn Arabi, Rumi, Ali, Jafar as-Sadiq, Ibn Rushd, to just mention a few of my own favourites. This was the secret of the Enlightenment in Cordoba, in the south of Spain, where I gave a talk earlier this year. And this is the secret which genuine Islamic philosophy has known all along. So another project that my institute's been working on for the last several years is to try and produce a series of commentaries on the existing great sacred texts of the world, starting with the Quran, the Ketuvim, the New Testament, but later others, Zoroastrian, Buddhist, Hindu, etc. The commentary on the Quran takes 200 listening hours. It's available. It's only in English. If somebody wants to translate it into Arabic or Turkish, please see me. I think if this was available in the mosques and madrasas, this alone would be an extraordinary contribution to the kind of theological piecework I'm talking about. Another aspect of the work of my institute that I want to just mention is the importance of reconciling the scientific and spiritual approaches to knowledge. We regard them as complementary rather than oppositional. Truth is multifaceted and can be approached from 1,001 different directions, and this is what makes human existence so interesting. For this reason, I must you to call. In 1624, Sir Francis Bacon published a very important book called The Advancement of Learning, which he dedicated to King James I of the United Kingdom. It was the time when Shakespeare was alive. James was the king knew Shakespeare, so did Bacon. They were friends, and they were working on the early Enlightenment. And John Dee had been a mentor of that generation. Now, what Bacon did in The Advancement of Learning is he did a survey of all known knowledge. He studied each branch of knowledge: mathematics, astronomy, physics, engineering, metallurgy. And when there was a gap in knowledge, he said, look, we need to work on this. This we don't know. This branch of mathematics doesn't exist yet. This branch of engineering we haven't developed yet. So it was a kind of a survey, and he called for the advancement of learning. Now, it was this book which kick-started the scientific revolution. The people that studied that book invented scientific methodology, empiricism, and later founded the Royal Society. And Isaac Newton and all the great scientists of modernity came out of that. Every scientist in this hall, every engineer, every technologist will owe their livelihood back ultimately to Bacon's book. What I'm saying is we need to do a new edition of The Advancement of Learning. And it could be an online project, a bit like Wikipedia, in which scientists are asked to say not what they know, but what they don't know. What are the gaps in our knowledge now? In every branch of learning. every branch of the sciences. Also, Bacon left out religious and philosophical knowledge from the advancement of learning. Specifically, he said it's too dangerous. If I talk about that, I'll get shot by extremists from all sides. What I'm saying, in the new edition of the advancement of learning, we should put religious, metaphysical, philosophical knowledge in there. We can use the periodic table as a scientific way of mapping it. And we can ask all the scholars, the sages, the theologians from every faith to say what they don't know, what needs working on still. This would be like a global advancement of learning for the planet. And I think it would kickstart a new scientific revolution, just as Bacon's original book did. Okay, I'm coming to my last point, number 12. This is an exciting one. Since this is a gathering of the Universal Brotherhood, and we're issuing a call to peace on behalf of all humanity, and humanity is suffering at the moment, it's hurting. You know, there's a lot of troubles on this planet. I want to mention, therefore, a very visionary but realistic project called the Golden Gate Project. The proposal is very simple. At present, I don't know if you've been to Jerusalem, but the eastern gate of the old city of Jerusalem is permanently closed. It's bricked up, you can't get in. And this was done, according to ancient legend, this gate will only be reopened when the true Messiah comes to Jerusalem. This will usher in a time of peace and justice for all mankind. There'll be celebrations and what in your language you call the happy tomorrows. Okay. The problem is that the gate is shut because the main monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, are in dispute about the nature of this Messiah's arrival and exactly who's going to open it. Christians believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah and he'll come back and reopen it. Secular Jews don't necessarily even like the idea of Messiah, so they don't know what to do about that. Muslims believe that Muhammad will come back and open it, and with Jesus. Now, but they all agree that the gate will be opened and there will be a time of universal peace. My institute has proposed publicly, and I'm repeating that now, a call that we collectively, we the people on the planet, open this gate symbolically, and that the leaders of every faith tradition and every genealogy of thought on the planet is invited symbolically to come through the gate, in a procession, and let us share that messianic potential which every faith tradition has seeded inside it, and not fight over whose Messiah is the best. I mean, that's a completely ridiculous notion. It was Krishnamurti and many other sages who said the Messiah is a collective phenomenon, it's an energy field that we can inhabit at our best. We all dip into. That's what enlightenment is, surely. It was an Ottoman Sultan who closed the gate, so that's why it's quite symbolic. I'm coming back here to Istanbul and just saying, look, please help open this gate. You shut it. It was Suleiman the Great in 1541. And the reason he did it was because there were too many people hanging around outside the gate waiting for the Messiah. And he just thought, shut it. Well, I'm saying, fine. The Ottoman Sultans have gone now. The People's Republic of Turkey and its highly intelligent scholars and sages, such as in this hall, can collectively open it. And you'd have to work with the authorities to control them out, the WAC, which is an Islamic committee, the Jewish authorities, and hopefully the Palestinian authorities, because it would be very symbolic. It could be a symbol of reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians. Anyway, there's a project. You can read about it in detail on my website, which is educationaid.net, and also on my YouTube channel. I've given an hour-long lecture. So, some people say to me when I talk about this project, they say, no, we can't do that yet. That's going to come. We can't do that yet. So I say, well, when are we going to do it? Well, we don't know, but not yet. But if you think about it logically, we're going to have to do it in a now. At some point it will take place in a now moment, right? All we have is a series of nows. Whereas if we keep going on living in this not yet moment, as long as we go on postponing this eschatological moment of collective enlightenment and well-being and happiness, which is what we want and what you as a group are dedicated to, for example, and others are, then so long we're going to carry on with this illusion and this violence and hatred and all the opposites of negativity. From a transpersonal perspective, there is only the now. As Meister Eckhart Tolle, Ramana Maharshi, Jung, Ken Wilber, and all the others, and all the Sufi sages, Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and so on, have said. So the gate will be opened in a now. I'm just saying, let's do it in our lifetimes. Let's do it now because it's urgent. My final point is the gate is only a symbolic thing. It's a bit of theatre, but humanity needs theatre. Just as we had negative theatre like 9/11, and it's mesmerised everybody, so we need positive theatre, which is like the Golden Gate reopening. We need to galvanise the goodwill of humanity. But intellectually, the task is remaining to reconcile secular and spiritual cultures and civilizations. There's a great rhetoric of warfare going on about the differences between secular and spiritual approaches to knowledge and to politics, governance and society. Now, Turkey can play a strong role in this reconciliation, since you have both a rich religious heritage in your culture, but also a strong commitment to secularism in your political ideals. It's the same in the UK, and indeed in the best of the European Enlightenment. Now, Marx was only one thinker who advanced the notion that science could bring progress to mankind. But the trouble is, he left out the spiritual bit. And if you go deeply into 19th century positivism, the works of Kant and Marx and so on, as I did, I've written books about this, you find that actually what they were talking about was an esoteric enlightenment underlying political transformation. So what I'm saying as a philosopher is we need to revisit that project and see what's the spiritual component within social enlightenment and progress. And rather than a war to the death between secularism and religions, what we can find is the third element in human civilization, which all cultures have, which is what I call the esoteric and Gnostic tradition, which I made point in number 1, which transcends easy labelling and embraces the wisest aspects of secularism, but also the wisest aspects of spirituality. It is this third choice which I would urge our fellows to choose, for as Kant urged us, we have the right to choose wisdom, if we have the courage to do this. In fact, it is our human destiny. So, to conclude my short address, I would like to stress, above all, that we are living through extraordinary times in the planet's history, as was pointed out to us at the beginning of this meeting. Possibly for the first time in the history of the world, we now know about the full complexity and range of global civilizations that are coexisting on this beautiful planet together. The call that must go out today from the Universal Brotherhood, seeking for peace and harmony among all the tribes and nations of mankind, is that the good news, embedded within all the spiritual teachings of mankind, is mutually intercomplementary. We can therefore authoritatively recommend that the polemic of hatred and attacking rhetoric currently going on between rival religious and philosophical systems on the planet can and must be replaced by a dialogue of love and mutual inter-enlightenment.